This is Sandeep Anand with Sand Compounding. I'm going to talk about the next transformation wave in the financial industry, which is leveraged or which is driven by the powerful technology concept called APIs or open APIs. API is application programming interfaces, and the open API or so-called open banking is driving the next wave of transformation in the financial industry, and especially with the new European regulations like the PSD2 or the Payment Service Directive 2 is, and these kind of new regulations are giving a lot of impetus to the new wave of open banking and open API based financial transactions. Let's take a look at a few of the slides here to understand how this new technology disruption is paving the way, because we need to understand from an investing standpoint on how the open banking and open API is going to impact. Let's see. Rise of open banking powered by APIs, as we discussed. How this is going to impact the banking industry. So what does an API and open banking mean? Let's first understand that. API, as the name, is an abbreviated version which just stands for application programming interfaces. At the core, it means enabling applications to talk to each other, or in this context, they are the building blocks that enable the third-party developers, especially like the payment players and the fintech players, build applications and services. So APIs are basically software code that governs the access points between the applications through which the request and response interchange happens. So basically, one application, for example, can submit a request asking for some data to another application which is hosted maybe within or outside the premise, and get a response back from the other application group. So such kind of interchange of messages happens between applications, and this governing software code is nothing but APIs, to put it in a very layman's term. A very common scenario is when we click share via Facebook, which we see in multiple websites. The API connects to the Facebook profile and does the posting, right, when we do the share via Facebook. So that is an API there. Now, open banking is an initiative led by the UK's Competitions and Markets Authority that enables the third parties to develop new products and services through the use of application programming interfaces. Predominantly, this is now rage in the UK markets. Primarily, regulators are mandating the opening up of these banks to share data. Why APIs now are open banking now? APIs were always used by banks and fintechs or financial institutions within their zones. They were never exposed outside, right? Because of the data constraints, because of the personal identifiable information that can be leaked, security concerns, etc. But right now, as I said, the PSD2 or Payment Service Directive is in Europe, is especially driving or mandating the banks to open up their systems to third parties. Now, this will hasten the rollout of open APIs. The structure of the payments and retail banking market is breaking up. Now, new fintech institutions can stay on top of the existing banking infrastructure to create exciting new digital products for their customers. We can see this trend developing in the lending business and in insurance and many other financial sectors. Now, what's ahead for banks? I mean, banks are looking at providing third-party services, and now they are trying to monetize these, exposing of these services or providing these services to the consumers of other applications or other financial institutions. So technology innovations have spoiled the customers of fintech companies, because fintech companies are not so much governed or binded by the regulatory mandates, and so they had the luxury to expose many services at the click of a button for the consumers. Now, but in this digital era, customers are demanding more and more from what they get from these banks as services. So the banks that are going to capitalize on this opportunity are going to do well eventually. Now, this is disrupting the whole banking value chain. Banking erstwhile, does not look to be a closed, fully integrated entity that will make it successful. It used to give the end-to-end financial services to the customers, and with the advent of open API, open banking, the banks will need to now open up a lot of services and provide an array of services in the new financial paradigm. Now this will take time to evolve and completely mature, but we need to, as investors, keep a close observation on this trend. Cases of adoption. Now there are many financial large banks who are already forayed or who has ventured into the API led digital transformation. Let's take a few case in point, like JP Morgan Chase forayed into API led digital banking lending primarily by partnering with fintech player called Anand. BBVA, another famous bank, has an open API platform for third parties to provide payment services based on banks' customer data or consumer data. Barclays is also a European bank which is exploring to create the next gen digital experiences using secure, innovative APIs. They have a famous feature or a product called Send Payment API, which is based on open banking again. And a series of another 20 additional banks are foraying into open banking, leveraging the power of APIs. What are some of the risks to this open banking concept? Regulators will have more interference in the operations of the banks because it is to deal with a lot of data and the data controls being in place as you may. Security is a big question because you are exposing the data of customers and especially financial world. They are hard bound on the security. So the banks that expose the customer data need to be really careful about ensuring or enforcing strong security measures which are available in the market. Encryption of data is one case in point. So still they are vulnerable to security breaches, but with the given benefits that will outweigh the constraints or risks, it's a good idea for banks to collaborate more, create consortiums, etc., wherein it becomes a little more safer and secure way of exchanging data. Hope these transformative technology trends and sessions are very useful from an investment standpoint.